Hello guys, Bismillah Rahman Rahim. This is Mohsin Azam interacting with you from my YouTube channel Business Innovation. Today we are going to start our fourth lesson of Planning Engineer and Primavera tutorials. As we discussed in our previous lesson, lesson number 3, the important clauses of general condition of Fidic general condition of contract. Today we will just present or study a general review of important clauses of condition of contract. First of all, we will start with the contract. So contract, as we discussed before, 1.6 is actually contract agreement. So within 28 days after the letter of acceptance, so once the contractor receive the letter of acceptance from the client, both parties should have to sign the contract agreement within 28 days. Commencement of the project. So for the commencement, we have clause 8.1, which is commencement of work. Within 7 days of kick-off meeting, the contractor should have to access to the site for the commencement or the execution of the project. And within 42 days after letter of acceptance, or when both the parties sign the letter of acceptance, the access or the commencement should be within 42 days. Right of access to the site. 2.1. After performing security, once the contractor submit the performance security as soon as possible so that the contractor can follow the work program without delay, because if the delay is coming from the program in the project, it can lead to the entitlement for the time or the cost of the delay. Performance security, which is 4.2. Performance security shall deliver to the employee within 28 days after the letter of acceptance. As we discussed before, that the performance security is actually the security for the project. It should be delivered within 28 days after the letter of acceptance, and the copy should be provided to the engineer. Shall be valid till the completion of the work and the remedy of the defect. So performance security should be valid for the entire duration of the project, including the defect liability period. Program of work. In program of work, we will discuss 8.2 is time for completion. Contractor shall complete within a specific time, including testing on completion and TOC. So as it's written here, the contractor should have to complete the project within specified time, but the completion should include the testing on completion and the taking over certificate. Program 8.3. So program shall be submitted, detailed program within 28 days. So once the kickoff meeting is done within 28 days, contractor should have to submit the program. It should include the sequence of work, duration of the stages, work belong to subcontractor, sequence and time of the testing, methodology of the major stages, and estimated resources. After this, we will discuss reports. So for the reports, 4.21 progress report is actually the clause from the Fidic general condition of contract. The contractor should have to submit 6 copies. Report shall be submitted monthly within 7 days after the last day of the period to which it is related. So within 7 days after the completion of each month, it should be submitted. It shall include progress drawing, status of the procurement, construction and testing, status of work for the subcontractor, progress photographs, resources, actual versus plan. So means the actual resources on the site and the plan which was planned at the beginning, test results, certificate of materials, claim register, and safety statistics and escrows. Okay, after this we have delays. So delays 1.9, delay drawing or instruction. Contractor shall give notice to the engineer when the work is likely to be delayed within a reasonable time specified. If the engineer failed to issue drawing or instruction, the contractor will be entitled as per 20.1. So if there is any delay regarding the instruction or the drawing, as we discussed before, then the contractor will be entitled as per subclass 20.1 for the payment and for the extension of time as per subclass 8.4. 4.12 is unforeseen physical condition. Obstruction. Unforeseen physical condition is basically obstruction, pollutant, subsurface and hydrological condition, excluding climate condition. So unforeseen physical condition does not include climatic condition. If the physical condition is unforeseeable and suffer delay or incur cost, then the contractor will be entitled as per subclass 20.1. Delay caused by authority. If the authority delay or disrupt the contractor work and delay and disruption was unforeseeable, then the contractor will be entitled as per subclass 20.1 for the extension of time and for the cost. Consequences of force majeure 19.1. What is actually force majeure? Force majeure is war, terrorism, disorder, strike, loss of material and earthquake. If there is a prevention from the performance due to the force majeure, notice shall be given within 14 days. If the delay continue after force majeure, then the contractor will be entitled as per clause 20.1. Variation 13.1 is right to vary. Variation may be initiated by engineer at any time prior to issue the TOC for the work. So before issuing the taking over certificate to the contractor, the engineer can instruct any variation. It includes changes of the quantity. The variation include if there is any change in the quantity, characteristic or dimension of any part of the work, or omission of any work, or addition of any work, plant, material, or services necessary for the permanent work, changes to the sequence or time of the execution of work. So these are all the variation. 13.3 is variation procedure. If the engineer requests proposal prior to the instruction of variation, the contractor shall either by giving a reason why they cannot comply or by submitting a program of work and proposal for the modification of the original program, engineer can agree or disagree proposal. After this extension of time, so 8.4 is the extension of time for the completion. The contractor will be entitled as per subclass 20.1 if the completion is delayed by variation or adverse physical condition or shortage of manpower and equipment, delay by the employer. After receiving notice, the engineer shall proceed with the 3.5 for the determination. Revise program. 8.6 rate of progress. If the progress is slow or behind the current program under 8.3, and 8.3 is actually the program. So if the progress is slow and it is behind the program under 8.3 by reason other than as mentioned in 8.3, contractor shall revise the program. By reason other than mentioned under 8.4 is actually the contractor shall revise the program by increasing the working hour and resources at the risk and cost of the contractor. If the revised method cause incur cost, employer will be entitled under 2.5. So if the rate of progress is slow or behind the program which is submitted under 8.3 or by any other reason which is not under subclass 8.4, then the contractor should have to revise the program either by increasing the resources or increasing the working hours. If the revised method incur cost for the employee, he will be entitled under 2.5. So if the revised methodology which the contractor will adopt, if it is affecting the employer, he will be entitled for under subclass 2.5, which is the employer claims. Suspension and resumption of work. 8.8 is suspension of work. Upon instruction from the engineer for suspension, the contractor shall protect the store and such part of the work against any deterioration or loss. So once the engineer instruct to suspend the work, the contractor should have to protect the store against any damage. 8.9 is consequences of suspension. If the suspension from the engineer instruction cause delay or incur cost, the contractor will be entitled for the extension of time under 8.4 and further payment under subclass 20.1. So if the suspension cause delay in the project or if it increase the price, the contractor will be entitled for the extension of time and for the payment due to such delay. 8.10 payment for the plant and material in event of the suspension. Entitled for the payment of value of the plant or material which have not delivered if the delivery is suspended more than 28 days or if the plant is marked as a employee property. So the contractor will be entitled for the payment of the plant if it is not delivered to the site, if the work is suspended more than 28 days, or in case if the plant is marked as a property of the employer. So for the plant or any material, if it is suspended, the delivery of any plant or material for more than 28 days, he will be entitled for the payment, or if it is marked as a property of the employer. 8.11 is prolonged suspension. If the suspension continue more than 84 days, the contractor on engineer permission can proceed with the work or proceed with the omission under subclass 13, which is variation or termination, or he can proceed with the termination under subclass 16.2. So if the suspension is prolonged more than 84 days, the contractor can start execution of the work, or he can terminate the contract under subclass 16.2, or if the suspension is a part of the project, he can proceed with the omission under subclass 13. 8.12 is resumption of work. After permission to proceed with the work, the contractor and engineer shall generally examine the suspended work and plant or material affected by the suspension. So after engineer instruction to proceed with the work, both the parties should have to visit the site to see all the suspended part of the work. Okay, next is termination. Termination 15.1, notice to correct. If the contractor failed to carry out any obligation, the engineer may notify the contractor for the remedy within a specific reasonable time. So if there is any defect in the project or in the total project or a part of the project, the engineer can give notice to the contractor for the remedy of the defect within a reasonable time. 15.2 is termination by the employer. If the contractor failed to submit performance security within 4.2, so as per the subclass 4.2, which is performance security, if the contractor failed to submit performance security or failed to correct the defect under 15.1, which we discussed now, if there is any defect and the engineer instruct to remove the defect, or the performance is too slow, or there is no progress, or failed to commence the work under subclass 8, which we discussed before, commencement, or failed to comply under the notice 7.5, or if the work is rejected under subclass 7.5, and if the contractor upon rejection, if he cannot fail to comply with the notice under 7.5, which is rejection, or 7.6, remedial of the work within 28 days. So if the work is rejected under 7.5, the contractor have to rework the part of the project, the part of the work, and he should have to remove the defect, and after remove the defect, he should have to go for the retesting, or if there is any work which is to be done under subclass 7.6 within 28 days, or if he subcontract the total scope of the project, or if he becomes the bankrupt or offer any commission or gift, the employee, after giving 14 days notice to the contractor, can terminate the contract and expel from the site. So the employee can terminate the project, as we discuss here, in case of number of scenarios, which is if the contractor failed to submit the performance security, or if he is failed to remove the defect, or the progress is slow, or if he is not able to start the project, or if it is failed to rectify the rejected part of the project, or if he is failed to remove the to perform the remedial works, or if he is subcontracting the whole project, or if he is become the bankrupt. So the employer can give 14 days notice to the contractor, and after 14 days they can terminate the contract and expel the contractor from the site. Contractor entitlement to suspension. If the engineer failed to issue the interim payment, so now when the contractor can terminate the contract. The first is that if the engineer failed to issue the interim payment certificate under subclass 14.6, or employee failed to make financial arrangement under subclass 2.4, or failed to pay the contractor under 14.7, which is the payment, the contractor may suspend the work or reduce the progress. After 21 days notice to the employee, if the contractor receive, so the contractor should have to give notice after 21 days if he facing delay in the payment, any interim payment, or if there is no evidence of the arrangement of the payment for the contract, or if the engineer is failed to release payment for the contract. So after giving the 21 days notice, the contractor can suspend the work or reduce the progress of the work. If the contractor receive evidence of the payment or certificate of the payment before termination, the contractor can proceed with the execution as soon as possible. If the event of the slow work of progress or suspension cause delay or incur cost, the contractor will be entitled under 20.1. So after giving notice, if the contractor feel that if the contractor receive any payment, or if they found any arrangement for the payment, the contractor can start execution of the work. If this event cause any delay or incur cost, the contractor will be entitled under subclass 20.1. The termination by contractor. The contractor can terminate the contract if there is no evidence of the payment under 16.1, as we discussed. So under 16.1, if there is no evidence of the payment within 42 days, or if the engineer failed to issue the payment certificate within 56 days, the contractor does not receive payment within 56 days after expiry of the payment under 14.7, or if the employee failed to comply under 1.6 contractor agreement, or if the suspension is prolonged under subclass 8.11, the employee becomes bankrupt or goes into liquidation, the contractor can proceed with the termination by giving 14 days notice. So as it's written here, that under 16.1, if there is no evidence or the engineer failed to issue the payment certificate within 56 days, or the contractor does not receive payment within 56 days after the expiry of the payment, or the employee failed to comply under 1.6 contract agreement. So 1.6, if the employee did not proceed with the or did not finalize the agreement with the contractor, or if the suspension is prolonged under subclass 8.1, or if the employee become bankrupt or goes into liquidation or offer any commission, the engineer can proceed with the termination by giving 14 days notice. Okay, claim and determinations. Claim, employer claim. If the employer consider himself to be entitled for the extension of for entitled for the payment or extension of defect notice period, the employee shall serve notice as soon as practicable. Notice related to defect liability period shall be before expiry. The particulars related to event shall contain the amount and the time for which he is entitled. The engineer shall then proceed for the determination under subclass 3.5 for the payment or for the extension of defect liability period under subclass 11.3. So this is actually the employer claim. If the employer consider himself for any payment or for the extension of defect notice period, he should have to serve the notice as soon as possible, but he should have to issue the notice before expiry of the defect liability period, and he should have to submit the particular related to the event for the time and for the payment. The engineer should have to proceed after receiving the documents from the employer for his claim. The engineer should have to proceed for the determination under subclass 3.5 for the payment if he is entitled for any payment, or for the extension of defect liability period under 11.3. 20.1 is contractor claim. If the contractor considers himself to be entitled for the payment or extension of time for completion due to any event, the contractor shall raise claim within 21 days after he become aware with the description of the event. So once the contractor become aware of any event, if it is causing the delay, or if he is considered himself to be entitled for the payment for this delay, within 28 days he should have to serve the notice, and within 42 days after the event the contractor should have to submit the particular for the extension and cost. If the event is continue, the detailed particular will be considered as an interim, and further particular shall be submitted monthly. Within 28 days after the event close, the contractor shall submit final particular within 42 days. So if the within 42 days after he became aware of the event, and contractor should have to submit the detailed particulars of the event, which it should include the time for which he is considered himself to be entitled and for the cost. And if the event is continue in every month within 28 days, he should have to submit the interim particular till the event is closed. The engineer shall give respond as approval when the final particular is submitted. Within 42 days, the engineer shall give response as approval, disapproval, or can request further particular. Upon the completion of the event, the engineer shall then proceed with the determination for the payment or for the extension testing on completion and employer taking over. So subclass 9.1 Contractor Obligation. The contractor shall give notice to the engineer for testing not less than 21 days, and once the engineer instruct for the testing, the contractor shall proceed within 14 days. So upon the completion of the work, the engineer should have to give notice to the contractor should have to give notice to the engineer for the testing not less than 21 days, and once the engineer instruct for the testing within 14 days, the contractor should have to perform the testing. 9.4 is failure to pass the test on completion. The test after retesting. Once if the test is failed, and after instruction from the engineer, the retesting is done under subclass 9.3, and if it is failed again, the engineer can order for further testing, or employee can terminate the contract or fault of the contract, which cannot be used, and will be entitled for the recovery of the sum paid plus the cost for the dismantling as per subclass 11.4c or issue TUC. So the employer can terminate the contract if the part or the whole work cannot be used by the employer, and he will be entitled for the sum which is paid to the contractor, including the dismantling cost, or he can issue the TUC to the contractor. Taking over certificate for the work or the section. Work shall be taken over by the employer after completion, and that TOC shall be issued. The notice for the TOC shall be issued more than 14 days after the contractor ready for the taking work. So once the contractor once the contractor consider himself to be ready for the taking over, he should have submit the notice to the engineer for the taking over certificate. Within 28 days, the engineer shall issue TOC or reject the application, give reason for rejection. The employee shall not use the work or the fault until issue TOC. So after notice or request from the contractor for the TOC, within 28 days the engineer should have to issue the taking over certificate to the contractor, or he can reject the application by giving any reason, or he can issue the substantial TOC to the contractor. And further, the employee cannot use the work or the part of the work until issue the TOC to the contractor. Defect liability under subclass 11.1, completion of outstanding work and remedy of defect. At the completion of defect liability, the contractor shall complete all the outstanding work stated in TOC, remove all the defects and damages on or before the expiry of defect liability period. So before the expiry of the defect liability period, the contractor should have to complete all the outstanding work which was stated in the TOC, and all the defects should be and damages should be removed before the expiry of the defect liability period. 11.2, cost of remedy of defect. All the work shall be carried out at the risk and cost of contractor if the design is changed because of the contractor fault or material or plant is not as per the contract. So if the design is changed because of the contractor, or if the material or plant is not as per the contract, then the cost will be upon the contractor for all the remedies of defects. 11.3, extension of defect notice period. If the project or part of the project cannot be used for the purpose after taking over due to defect or damage, the employer will be entitled for the extension of defect period under the Employer Claim 2.5, but it should not be more than 2 years. So if the part of the project or full project cannot be used by the employer after taking over, the employer will be entitled for the extension of defect liability period under subclass 2.5, but the defect liability should not be more than 2 years. 11.4, failure to remedy of the defect. If the contractor failed to remove the defect, then the remedial work will be executed at the cost of the contractor under subclass 11.2 by the employer. So if the contractor failed to remove the defect, the employer can proceed with to remove the defect from the project at the cost of the contractor. The employer can do the work by himself or by using any other representative, or the employer can request the engineer to reduce the contractor price, or the employer can request the engineer to reduce the contract price, or if the employee is unable to use the whole project or part of the work, he can terminate the contract and he will be entitled for the recovery of all the sum paid plus the dismantling cost. 11.7, right of access. Until performance certificate has been issued, the contractor have right of access to the work. So once the performance certificate has been issued, after this the contractor cannot access the site. Performance certificate. Performance of the project shall not be considered completed until the engineer issue the performance certificate to the contractor. The engineer shall issue performance certificate within 28 days after the expiry date of defect liability period. Demobilization should be within 28 days after performance certificate. So once the defect liability is completed, the engineer should have to issue the performance certificate to the contractor within 28 days, and after receiving the performance certificate, the contractor should have to start demobilization within 28 days. Okay, payment is 2.4 is employer financial arrangement. Employer shall submit evidence of the financial arrangement under subclass 14 for the contract within 28 days upon the request from the. So once the contractor requests to the employer for the evidence regarding the financial arrangement within 28 days, he should have to give the evidence that the financial arrangement is done for the contract. Advance payment 14.2. Upon submitting guarantee for the advance payment, the engineer shall make advance payment for mobilization. Engineer shall issue interim payment certificate for the first. So upon submitting guarantee for the advance payment, the employer shall make advance payment for the mobilization. Engineer shall issue interim payment certificate for the first installment after receiving the statement under subclass 14.3. Application of interim payment, and when the employer receive performance security and guarantee, the guarantee shall be valid until the advance payment is repaid. So advance payment is actually the payment for the mobilization. So once the employer receive the guarantee for the the advance payment, he should have to release the advance payment for the mobilization. So upon submitting the statement from the contractor side, the engineer should have to issue the interim payment for the first installment after receiving the statement under subclass 14.3, which is application of the interim payment when the employer receive performance security and guarantee. So here, after receiving the performance security and guarantee for the advance payment, the employer should have to release the advance payment for the mobilization. The guarantee shall be valid until the advance payment is repaid. So the guarantee for the advance payment should be valid until it is repaid to the employer. 14.3 is application for the interim payment certificate. The contractor shall submit 6 copies at the end of each one, showing the amount for which the contractor is entitled, supporting document, and the progress for the current one. Payment 14.7. The employer shall pay advance payment within 42 days after LOA. So the advance payment which we discussed, it should be paid to the contractor within 42 days after the letter of acceptance, or within 21 days after receiving the performance security, or when the employer receives the performance security and guarantee for the advance payment as per 14.2. The amount certified in the interim payment and the final payment certificate within 42 days. So payment for the advance payment within 42 days after the letter of acceptance and within 21 days after receiving the performance certificate, the guarantee, or the amount certified in the interim payment and the final payment certificate within 56 days. So the employee shall pay the advance payment within 42 days after letter of acceptance, or within 21 days after receiving the performance security and guarantee, or the amount which is certified by the engineer in the interim payment certificate or the final payment certificate within 56 days. Payment of retention money. When the TOC is issued for the work, the first half shall be certified. So once the contractor receives the TOC, the first half of the retention money should be certified to the contractor. The second half shall be issued at the expiry of defect liability period. Application 14.11 is application for the final payment certificate within 56 days after performance certificate. So once the performance certificate is received by the contractor shall submit the draft statement supporting document for the final payment certificate. This statement will be called as final statement. So within 56 days after receiving the performance certificate from the engineer, the contractor should have to submit the final statement. The final statement will be a draft copy. First, the contractor should have to submit a statement as a draft for the engineer review, and once it is agreed with the engineer, he should have to submit a statement which will called be as a final statement. So once the final statement is submitted from the contractor, the engineer should have to issue a final payment certificate to the employer for the payment. So now issue of the final payment certificate within 28 days after final statement and written discharge under subclass 14.2, the engineer shall issue final payment certificate for the payment to the employer for the payment. So within 28 days after final statement which we discuss here, the final statement should be submitted from the contractor to the engineer. So once they agreed with the statement, the engineer should have to submit within 28 days the final payment certificate to the employer for the payment to the contractor. Okay, next is subcontractor. 4.4 is actually subcontractor. The contractor shall not subcontract the whole scope of the project, and the contractor will be responsible for and any defect of the subcontractor. The contractor shall not be required to take approval for the nominated subcontractor. If there is any nominated subcontractor, so the approval for the contractor in case of nominated subcontractor is not required. The prior approval of the engineer shall be obtained for other proposed subcontractor, and for all other subcontractor the approval from the engineer is required. The contractor shall give notice to the engineer prior to commencement of the work not less than 20 days. So once the contractor is ready for the commencement of work of any subcontractor, he should have to serve a notice not less than 28 days. Class 5 is nominated subcontractor. So this is actually definition under 5.1. Subcontractor which is stated in the contract or whom engineer instruct to employ as a subcontractor. So for which it is the subcontractor which is part of the contract, or for which there is instruction from the engineer to subcontract a part of the work. 5.3 is the payment to nominated subcontractor. The contractor shall pay the amount which the engineer certified to be due in accordance with the subcontract. So the contractor shall have to pay the amount to the amount for the subcontractor should be paid by the main contractor, and the amount plus other charges shall be including in the contract price, and the amount which the contractor will pay to the subcontractor to the nominated subcontractor will be including in the contract price. Okay, that's it for today. So today we complete the important clauses from the general condition of contract. It was just a general review. Hopefully you will understand some important clauses. These clauses we will discuss mostly in our upcoming lessons. So from next lesson, hopefully we will start the Primavera tutorials. If you like the video, please follow my Facebook page Business Innovation and subscribe my YouTube channel Business Innovation. Thanks for watching.